Let me share my screen with you. And let me go up. There we go. I do a lot of things with language. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is looking at the etymology of words. Well, etymology means words, but let's say words that play a particular function in a language. And what I told you function is parts of speech, okay? There's about 8 parts of speech in English. Here, I've always been interested. Here represents my interest in verbs. Where does a verb come from? And why is a verb considered important or not considered important in a language? And so I decided to look up when irregular verbs, verbs that do not follow the rule of the language, when did they come into the language? And why is it that over time they did not become regular? Some verbs do. Like, for example, the verb learn, to learn, L-E-A-R-N. It used to be the past tense and the past participle ended in T, not E-D. Sometimes in English now you have both. You have I learned my lesson or I learned my lesson. It really is the same sound because the ED almost sounds like a T, but the difference is in the writing. In the irregular form, it's L-E-A-R-N-T, learnt. I still write it like that. Just like I still write burn, B-U-R-N, in the past tense, burnt, B-U-R-N-T. But it's no longer incorrect to write learned, the past tense, L-E-A-R-N-E-D. The pronunciation is not that different. Either for burnt, it's B-U-R-N-E-D. But a lot of irregular verbs have not changed their irregularities. They remain irregular. So this is a short video on irregular verbs and when they came into the language. For those who are interested in etymology, a lot of people might say, well, I don't care when it came in. I still don't understand them. Yeah, that's true. But one of the reasons they might be so irregular is that they came into the language at the very beginning of the language, and people use those words a lot. So they never changed. Their irregularity was almost imprinted into the brains of the people. So it never changed. The irregularity never changed. And you'll notice that most of the verbs, if not all of the verbs, are Germanic. That is, they come from the Germanic branch of the language tree. They do not come from the Latin branch, which would be French or Spanish or Italian or Portuguese or Latin itself, or they did not, and ancient Greek is something apart, or they did not come from ancient Greek. Okay, and they're the most basic part of the language. And it's the part of the language that would make up a lot of the sight words for children that children have to learn. So let's just look at some of them. We're not going to look at all of them because it's quite a few. The verb to be, everybody knows that's a very important verb. The verb to break, there's the verb to burn. The verb to, not to, well, let me see, the verb to do, yes, and go back up because I was going to say to and you don't say to, can. These are, oh, by the way, these are verbs that entered into English prior to the year 900, Common Era, CE, or for a lot of people, AD. Okay, so we're talking about this era. We're not talking about the ancient world. So because English as a language did not begin to, at different aspects and segments of the language did not begin to form until after the fall of the Roman Empire. And you begin to have different groups in what was one time Britain. Now it's became England, which means Angloland. And the Angles were one of the Germanic tribes that came into Britain, conquered parts of Britain, and settled there. You had the Angles, the Saxons. That's why it used to be called, white people in this country used to be called Anglo-Saxons. I don't think people do it anymore. Yeah, because it used to be a word called WASP, W period, A period, S period, P period. So if somebody called you a WASP, it's not the nicest thing to call someone. It was a description. It was white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, a WASP. So, and Anglo-Saxons represented two of the groups that came and conquered and destroyed the Celtic groups in England. England draws its history and its ancestry from the Germanic part of the world, not the Celtic part of the world. The Celtic part of the world was either destroyed or forced out. The Scottish, the Irish, and the Welsh are Celtic, Gaelic people, but they're not Germanic. Their language isn't Germanic. You can look at, Welsh or Scot, Gaelic, not Scots, Gaelic, or I heard him call it Irish, but the language that the Irish speak, I think it's Celtic, but I'm not sure. No recognition, none, because the language was almost destroyed. So we have to become, to drink, to eat. Notice that these are some of the most basic word of the English language. And as I said before, they came into English before 900 CE, Common Era, or AD, depending on how you define it. Same thing, AD, CE. To fly, to give, to go, to grow. And some of these words you don't see anymore. For example, forbear. You don't see that anymore. Okay. To forego, to baguette. To baguette. It should be up here. I guess it's not here. No. I didn't even put that word here because nobody says, you only see that in the Bible. What's it called? What is it? One person begets another. Okay, let's see here. To know. Oh, this is not in order of entering into language. This is alphabetical order. But all of these words enter into the language before 900. That means they entered the language when English was still a Germanic language. Only a Germanic language. The only Latin parts of the language would come from the church. During the time of when the Roman Catholic Church was trying to convert the different groups, the Anglos, the Saxons, the Jutes, and the Frisians to Christianity. Oh, by the way, the language that is closest to English, is Frisian. I've heard Frisian spoken. When I was in Europe, I heard it. You know what? You can hear pieces of English, but I wasn't able to get a sentence because just hearing pieces of your own, hearing pieces of the language that you speak, but without any context, without the verbs and the noun, the way you're expecting it, or not expecting it, but just pieces, no. I was maybe, no, maybe 1%, 2%. So that's nothing. That's nothing. Okay, to lead, to leave, to lie. Okay, I'll go down to ring. That's not the, to sell, to send, to sit, to slay. You don't say that anymore, to slay. To slay means to, to kill. You see it in the Bible, maybe, or maybe in the Quran when they translate it. To steal, to wear. So you can see that these are some of the most, to weep. You see that, but you don't say I was weeping all night. You say I was crying all night. Let me see if cry is here. To do, nope, nope. So weep was there before cry. Let's see. That means it might have been to sleep, because I thought I couldn't remember if sleep was there. Because if sleep wasn't there, there was a word that described it, but that word was in the English language up until a certain point, and then another word takes its place. To sow, well, of course, to sow, S-O-W, because you're talking about the fields, you're talking about farming. To stand, well, of course. To think, yes. To win, to write. Now, the next list is a list of words that came into the English language after 1150. You might find now more words that are Latin-based, most definitely French-based, but not necessarily, because even though France, William the Conqueror came across the English Channel 1066 and beat Harold, the King of England, and took over. And he was he had quite an iron hand on the area that he now ruled. That doesn't mean that the conquered people took up the language. They might have taken up the language if they had immediate contact with the English might have taken up the French words, or mix it with their own English words if they had contact with the French. Now these are Northern French, not Parisian French. If they had contact with the French. Otherwise, no, they would still be speaking English. In fact, England as a result of the conquest, there was like 3 tiers. There was a Germanic English, the Germanic tier, which was broken down, between the different Germanic groups. So within that tier, it was broken down the different Germanic groups that conquered England. But after the Roman Empire, which was hundreds of years ago by now, right? Then there was the French, and they came over as a result of 1066, William the Conqueror. I heard him called also William the Bastard, because his mother and father weren't married. I don't know how true that is, but I've seen that quite a bit, William the Bastard, but I saw more William the Conqueror. And then, of course, now you're talking about the Catholic Church being more or less well entrenched, and then you have Latin. Latin and French were determiners that you were either educated or you had money and land. English was designated as a dialect, not a language. It was a dialect. It was no longer, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was no longer being written. It was no longer a written language. It was only the language used by the peasantry among themselves in their homes. And if they don't have an education, well, they wouldn't have education back then, in their homes and outside in their fields, right? But the official language, the language of government, was Norman French. The language of the church was Latin. Okay. But English was a dialect, and it remained a dialect for hundreds of years. So when they talk about, language being a dialect, and that shows, a people's apostrophe S intelligence, English was a dialect, right? And for hundreds of years after the Roman Empire, the people of England spoke different Germanic dialects. I don't consider them dialects. I don't consider what's spoken in Jamaica dialect or what's spoken in Haiti dialects. I think they're languages, right? But that's what it was called. If you look in most history books, it'll be called a dialect. I consider it a language. It did the function of a language. People use it as a language. It's a language. Okay, so let's look at the words that came into English, after 900, but prior to 1150. To back, oh my God, it has so many different meanings, and it's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adjective, it's an adverb. To bite, to bring, to buy, let me go down, to kit, to keep, to put, to run, all of these irregular verbs. To spill, I think, is both irregular and regular. The past tense can be spilt or spilled, ed or t or ed. To sting, to take, very important verb. Then I have here words that came after 1175. Okay, now sometimes a word can come in, but it comes in like to backslide, which we don't say that much. It comes in with a different meaning. To browbeat, to dig. And then I explain, you can see the date that it comes in, okay? And it might give you a little bit more information. It tells you the word, when it came in, where the word comes from, the Anglo-Saxon. When I can find it, I give the different meanings. So this is a short video because, sometimes understanding the etymology or understanding the origin of anything, sometimes it can help you to understand better what you're learning. So this is just not short anymore, a video on that. So this is Coralla Ficklin McLean. Please visit my website, welcome, WYLCONE, welcome.com. Also, thank you for visiting my platforms, and thank you for watching my video. I would appreciate if you could subscribe. Stop sharing, and I'm going to say thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.